The Minnesota Wild begin the second half of the season tonight against the Winnipeg Jets. But what are three huge keys for the Wild in the second half to maintain the success they had in the first half? We discuss today on Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. And just as a reminder, Locked On Wild is free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we look at why Cam Talbot, Kaapo Kahkonen, Freddy Gaudreau, and Bill Guerin could be the biggest keys to the Wild continuing their success in the second half that they had in the first half. So we'll discuss each area and why they are critical for the Wild to maintain their positioning in the playoff race as well. My name is Seth Topal, host of Locked On Wild, veteran Minnesota sports content producer with over a decade's worth of experience covering all of your favorite Minnesota sports teams and now focused exclusively on the Minnesota Wild. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thanks for tuning into today's episode of Locked On Wild. And as we mentioned, we've got a few big areas for the Wild as they begin the second half of the season against the Winnipeg Jets tonight. Some key areas that will help the Wild maintain and hopefully enforce the success that they had in the first half of the season. So we're going to start with the guy who has helped create the second dynamic scoring line for the Minnesota Wild. That, of course, being Mr. Freddie Goudreau. So coming into the season, didn't really know a whole lot of what to expect from Goudreau, more of a defense-oriented guy. And it seemed like, at the time, a depth signing for the Wild. Who knew that Freddie Gaudreau would help unlock the resurgence of Kevin Fiala and the emergence of one Matt Boldy. As this season progresses, as we get closer to the NHL trade deadline, one of the areas that this team obviously is keeping an eye on as a potential spot to upgrade, and as we, as members of the media that cover this team and fans as well, that center spot on the Fiala-Boldy line is going to be one that gets a lot of attention, and rightfully so, because if this team can continue to get what we've seen from both Fiala and Boldy over the last 10 games, Kevin, for example, 12 points in the month of January in 10 games, had 6 goals, 6 assists, and he started right off to finish the first half with a goal and an assist against the Blackhawks. So Fiala has 14 points in his last 11 games. No coincidence that took place once Matt Boldy came into the fray. And Boldy now has 11 points in his young Wild career. So one of the big talking points before the season started was got to get some help for Fiala. And as the early part of the season played out, got to get some help for Fiala. Got to get him some good offensive players on that line. And now that we've done that, you've got two parts of that line that are firing on all cylinders. And if Freddie Gaudreau can be the third piece to that wheel and can keep that line rolling along, that's going to give Bill Guerin less of a need to go out and get the Locked On Wild favorite, Claude Giroux, who has been kind of my top trade target. Not going to have to worry about trying to acquire a guy like JT Miller, Claude Giroux, any of the other names that have been linked to the Wild in terms of potential centers to trade for. If Freddie Gaudreau can add a little bit of offense to his arsenal as he has done over the last couple of games. He's going to be viewed as a valuable part of this line, to where Bill Guerin's probably not going to try to take him out, because his defense already is something that is an asset of his, and as we've seen over the last couple of games, has started to chip in with a couple of goals in the last week, and had a goal and an assist against Chicago once again. So if Gaudreau adds offense to what he brings to the table, the Wild are probably going to be pretty set with what that line brings them. And then you look at them going up against any of the other teams they would compete against in the playoffs, whether it be St. Louis or Chicago. You've got the Kaprizov line doing its thing and continuing to just terrorize anybody that they go up against. You now have the Boldy, Fiala-Gaudreau line, which can provide just as much of a scoring spark as the Kaprizov line can. Then you've got the Eriksson Ek line that can roll out and do their thing, and you've got the fourth line capable of doing their thing. If Freddie Gaudreau continues to play at the level that he is, Bill Guerin is going to be mighty tempted to just keep that line at the level that it's currently at. It's not offensively like he really has to do all that much, because again, Exhibit A, you have Kevin Fiala on one side, you have Matt Boldy on the other. Those guys are more than capable of pushing the offense and creating their own offense, and creating chances for themselves. And Gaudreau is just able to kind of be a part of that. He's able to kind of Victor Rask it, if you will. Obviously, Gaudreau doing a little more than Victor did, but at the same time, you're just kind of along for the ride as the center on that line. However, this conversation completely flips if Gaudreau kind of starts to go quiet and that line starts to also go quiet. Then Garan is going to kind of feel the need to upgrade that spot as well. And let's keep in mind, an upgrade may not necessarily be a trade. Marco Rossi is just chilling down in Iowa, continuing to be a point per game player down there. So Rossi is there if needed for this Wild team. It all rests, though, on Freddie Gaudreau, and if he is able to continue to add offense to his arsenal, then that could truly be the missing piece, or one of the missing pieces for this Wild team to make them super dangerous. So, critical portion of the schedule. Let's keep an eye on what Freddie Gaudreau does to supplement Kevin Fiala and Matt Boldy. And don't be surprised if his numbers start to go cold if Bill Guerin starts to make some phone calls to try to help out Fiala and Boldy. So that is the first key area that we're going to take a look at here as the second half unfolds. We, of course, are going to talk goaltending today. We'll also talk some Bill Guerin and to the moves that he will make to help the team, both trade-wise and roster juggling as well. All of that is coming up next here on Locked On Wild. Got beard? Get primal. Yeah, that's right. You heard me. Got beard? Get primal. If you or someone you care about has a beard, it needs to get primal. Maybe you're the guy who has never considered the benefits of treating your beard with product. Primal Origin Oils will stop the itch and make your beard look healthy and groomed. Their products are free from harmful synthetic ingredients and with low impact on the planet. Primal Origin Oils makes balms, oils, and whipped butter that are renowned as the best feel in beard products available. All products are fair trade certified and handcrafted in the United States. We know that every company claims to have their best, but Primal Origin Oils challenges you to compare their ingredients and the feel in beard to the other products you've used. They promise you will see and feel the difference. So you can use the promo code LOCKED ON, and that'll get you 20% off at primaloriginoils.com. Again, use the promo code LOCKED ON to get 20% off at checkout at primaloriginoils.com. Continuing today's episode of Locked On Wild, and again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. With the Olympics underway, make sure to check out Olympic Hockey Daily, presented by the Locked On NHL podcast, a bonus podcast covering all the action in Beijing. You can find it on the Locked On NHL podcast feed. Locked On NHL is free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Continuing to look at the three biggest areas for the Wild to continue their success and sustain their success into the second half. So we talked about Freddie Gaudreau and anchoring that Boldy Fiala line to try to give that team, the Wild, some major impact scoring. Let's also go now to the goaltending position. There's been a lot of discussion about the goalie spot for the Wild here over the last couple of days and weeks. How should the Wild handle the starts in the second half of the season? Do they go with the true number one goalie and a backup? Do they go with a 1A, 1B? What do the Wild need to do in order to make this whole thing work? Well, let's start by just acknowledging the fact that this isn't like the Tampa Bay Lightning, who have Andrei Vasilevsky, or any of those other teams that have that legit, true ace goalie that's your starter. And in the event that they need a night off, you have a guy who starts maybe 10 games. This is a Wild team that has two goalies that are capable of getting it done. And so, down the stretch, the Wild need to treat it as such. We can't go into the second half of this season, especially with what's coming in February and what's coming in March and what's coming in April. You can't treat it like Devin Dubnyk, the Devin Dubnyk of old, where he's going to get 75% of the starts, and you're just going to ride him to try to get into the playoffs and go with whatever the backup situation may be in the odd chance that there's a back-to-back or that Dubnyk needs a night off. We need to make sure that both goalies are given the opportunities to stay fresh, to stay sharp, and in the event that there would be an injury, are ready to step in and take on more of a load if one or the other ends up missing some time. If we just roll out here and give Cam Talbot, 8 out of every 10 starts, that does not do any sort of a service to Kaapo Kahkonen, who, if you check the numbers, has actually been pretty good over his last handful of starts. 6-0-1 in January with a 2.33 goals against average and a 934 save percentage. And it's not like he was just, and yes, 2 of the starts did come against Chicago. 1 was against Montreal, but let's look at the others. Started against the Boston Bruins on the road, won that game. Won against the Washington Capitals at home in a shootout, won that game. Took Colorado to overtime on the road, and Colorado in the midst of their best stretch of hockey in franchise history. So the Wild are one of the few teams to even get them to overtime during that stretch. So played really well in that game, and you could argue that that Kaapo would have won that game against the Avalanche if not for those 2 penalties that the Wild took back-to-back, which led to the Avalanche scoring their first 2 goals of the game. Some of the other teams, he started against the New York Islanders, who are playing better despite their overall record, but again, started that on the road. So it's not like Kaapo is just getting starts against like the bad teams in the NHL. He is starting against quality competition and is winning and is holding teams to 2 or 3 goals on any given night. So this is not a situation of a true starter and a backup. You've got 2 guys that are capable of winning any given night of the week. And so the Wild need to make sure that both are given opportunities for starts down the stretch so that neither gets rusty So we don't have a situation like we had um, last year where Talbot gets just a ton of starts and you don't really see Kaapo until Talbot got injured. And then we saw what Kaapo was able to do during that stretch. Got to see both guys get an adequate number of starts to keep them both fresh, keep them both ready to go, so that God forbid if, let's say, Talbot gets hurt again, that Kaapo is ready to step in and to take the lion's share of the starts. Because beyond that, beyond those two guys, not a lot that can really help you here this season, or until Jesper Wallstedt is ready to step up onto the Wild roster. So the schedule is, I guess, kind of forgiving in that the Wild really don't have any true back to backs during this February stretch. I mean, they play tonight, then they don't play again until Saturday. Then they go Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, uh, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So your back to backs are not until March 10th or 11th during this stretch. And so at that point, yes, make sure both goalies get in there, but you got to make sure that if Talbot gets 2 or 3 starts in a row, get Kaapo in there, get him an opportunity to get loose and get a game under his belt. Because again, it's not like you're just throwing the game away to a backup that really has no chance to win a game. Kaapo's done that this year. He's done that over the last couple of years. I mean, he's got 10 wins on the season right now. So, critical factor to how the Wild do down the stretch this season to try to make that legitimate run that they're capable of is how the goalie situation shakes out. And both guys have played better over the last couple of weeks after a rocky start to the season, at least in terms of goals allowed. There's still plenty of great saves made by both guys, but let's make sure that the starts are spread evenly and we don't get like a 70-30 split, because then let's say Talbot gets injured before the playoffs start and you're throwing Kaapo in, he's going to be rusty. So that's the other big area, or one of the other big factors to this team's sustained run here to start the second half. Make sure that the goalie situation is allowed to play itself out with not a true starter and backup situation, with a 1A and a 1B. We'll finish today's episode of Locked On Wild by talking about what general manager Bill Guerin needs to do to help this team continue to succeed. That is next here on Locked On Wild. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. As football season continues its march through the playoffs, right to the big game this weekend. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just football. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, the NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates of current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season, such as this one. Who do you think comes away with more? Will it be total goals in the NHL for Sunday of the Super Bowl? That is the current favorite at -140. Or is it first half total points in this year's Super Bowl, which is currently running at +110 at BetOnline? You can check out that and more offers at BetOnline, where the game starts. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. Keep those comments coming on YouTube. Keep the interaction going. Absolutely love to chat with everybody. That makes this show so much fun to do every single day. Final look at one of the big factors for the Minnesota Wild down the stretch to continue their first half success into the second half of the season. We're looking at general manager Bill Guerin. Now, a couple of different factors to this. First off, obviously, is what are the Wild going to do, if anything, at the trade deadline? But before we talk about that, there's going to be hopefully not too much, but there still will be some roster juggling for the Wild this season with injuries and otherwise. We did see that Matt Dumba was put on injured reserve, so looks like he will be out for a few games at least. And this is a situation where the depth of this team is going to be tested once again. Now, I don't think, at least it doesn't seem like, it's going to be too long of a uh, injury situation for Dumba due to the fact that Kalen Addison was not one of the call-ups for the team. They brought up defenseman Kevin Churchman, so that's leaning towards Jordy Ben being able to slot in for a couple of games to fill that spot. But Bill Guerin has single-handedly helped reshape the depth of this team to where they're able to overcome the injuries. I mean, just look at the injury list this year. The Wild have been without Jared Spurgeon, Jonas Brodin, now Matt Dumba. They were without Kirill Kaprizov for a game. Marcus Foligno's been out. Joel Eriksson Ek has been out. Cam Talbot has been out. And the team continues to just chug along because turns out the depth is pretty good for this team. And so one of the big things that Bill Guerin is going to need to keep an eye on is how to kind of plug in guys that need to fill in for a game or two here and there. If the team sustains injuries or if a guy just needs a breather. Again, it's not going to be too daunting due to the fact that there really aren't any true back-to-backs. There will be off days and opportunities for guys to, get a day of rest in between games. But in the event that somebody does need a little bit of a break or is out for a game or two, Guerin's going to need to have his hands all over the roster to make sure that the right moves are made to keep this success humming along. Obviously, the big one is going to be the trade deadline. Will this team try to do something to help with the success that they've had so far this year, or are they going to kind of just let it ride with the mix that has worked so well and has gotten this team to this point in the year? That's the $1 billion question for this Wild team, and we've made plenty of arguments on both sides of the coin as to if the Wild should make a move to signify that they're going all in, or if they should trust that things like what happened with bringing Matt Boldy up are going to happen with this team and continue to make them a legit contender in the Western Conference. And I don't think there's a right answer either on both sides of the coin, because a trade, you're giving up assets. You are maybe throwing a little bit of a wrench into some of the salary cap plans for next year and beyond, depending on what the move is. So would that signify to the team that ownership believes in them and give them a boost to the playoff run with the guy who can help fill a spot that maybe isn't as strong as the rest of the roster? Certainly. But if the chemistry with this group is as good as I believe it is, maybe just let it ride and just let the team be the ones that dictate their own success. There really is, like I said, there's no right or wrong answer to either approach. And so Bill Guerin's just going to have to keep a close eye on this team, and I know he will. Keep a close eye on this team over the next month before the trade deadline. See what the asking prices are for particular players. Try to make sure that Colorado doesn't scoop everybody up, and just go with your first instinct. If your first instinct is that the team needs a little help but has a legitimate chance to win, do it. If your first instinct is to just let this group of guys continue to be successful and to just push on through the rest of the season into the playoffs with this group, then do that. But either way, Freddie Gaudreau, Talbot, and Kahkonen, and Bill Guerin, maybe not the only questions that this team has going into the second half of the season, but those are definitely some of the bigger ones that this team will have to figure out an answer to. So, second half of the season starts this evening against the Winnipeg Jets. Let's hope that the second half starts the way the first half finished, with a flurry from this Minnesota Wild team. That is going to wrap it up for today's episode of Locked On Wild. And once again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. Now that your first listen of the day is done, make sure to head over to the Locked On NHL podcast, where you can hear from Locked On experts about all things surrounding their teams and the entire NHL, as well as great Olympic coverage all throughout the week in under 30 minutes. Locked On NHL is available wherever you listen to podcasts. Just like Locked On Wild, we're available wherever you listen to podcasts, and we're available anytime you want to listen as well. Make sure to check us out on our social media channels as well. You can just search Locked On Wild to find everything that you need to for your favorite Minnesota hockey team. We are keeping you as up to date as possible on all things Minnesota Wild each and every day as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.